Hello, it's CisVolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. Are you as excited as I am to make the cards I just showed you? This is already the 5th video in which I make cards with the text stencils. This time I use the Let's Palty and the Woof Woof stencils. For the stencil technique you will need Versamark ink or some other kind of transparent embossable ink and distress glaze or embossing powders. Distress oxide inks we will use for some extra color. I will also use these text balloon stencils, balloons and party balloons. The balloon is for the shape, but maybe you have another stencil shape or a die cut shape that is suitable for the technique as well. Because I will be using lots of ink and water, I will use Craft Emotions water color card paper. It is very white and smooth and great for coloring, stamping and adding color with water. The balloon shape I trace on top of this aquarelle paper with a pencil. This balloon will be the interactive shape on the card. Also, it will be the part on which I will be doing the beautiful stencil technique. When tracing, I only trace the outer lines. This other balloon shape fits exactly on top or under the balloon. So that is a very good option to combine them together. This balloon I cut out and use it to trace the second one. Although I could also have traced the stencil twice immediately. It makes no difference. Erase the pencil lines before proceeding with the balloons. I intentionally don't cut out the third balloon yet, but I do keep a piece of paper aside for it. I will show you 3 different balloons with slightly different techniques and colors. 2 balloons I have already finished. The third will also be a balloon, but for that it will be nicer if I cut out the shape after coloring. We are now going to shift over to my craft sheet next to my glass mat. In text stencils video number 3 I showed you how to ink smudge a beautiful background, and just like in that video I now will ink smudge the balloons. For the easiest card I chose purple. I don't use purple much, but I love this color combination. Always choose colors that match nicely together in a light and darker version. The Distress Oxide Color Combinations video series by Lou Collins enormously helped me with choosing nice color combinations. I highly recommend you to watch her videos on YouTube. It's paper crafting with Lou Collins. And the colors I use are Shaded Lilac and Villainous Potion Distress Oxide. You probably recognize the ink smooching technique. Dab the inks on a craft sheet, then spray some water over it and dip the watercolor paper in it. A simple activity and very relaxing as well. Dry the paper with a heat tool and dip the paper in again and again. And every time dry in between layers. I like it if there are still some white parts visible, but that is totally a matter of choice and taste. Choose whatever colors you like. For the second balloon I chose the colors Salvage Patina and Salty Ocean to start with. To distress the square stamp shapes and to get bigger droplets, I wiped through the ink puddle with my finger. I added Uncharted Mariner later to get more contrast in the balloon. And because I want to combine the balloon with gold embossing powder, I also add a tiny bit of Distress Oxide tea dye. A tiny bit, as I say, and I also wipe it before drying it. I only want a few little golden spots. On the edge of the balloon, I can at last add darker, less watery spots to have darker edges. This is exactly why I started cutting before adding color. Having the shape before adding color allows you to darken the border a bit or determine where you want a bit more or less color. And I really like how this one turned out. For the third card and third balloon, I will make a gradation with the color combination tea dye, candied apple and ground espresso. Also a beautiful color combination and favorite technique. It would take too much time to show you in detail how I blended this, but I can tell you to add color gently with circular motions and apply the colors alternately. The watercolor paper helps enormously to make a beautiful blend. Might you mess up or have fingerprints or don't like the blend, you can always spray it with water to distress it a little. You can prevent inky fingers or fingerprints on the paper by holding it with an extra piece of paper or vellum. Make sure the paper is extremely dry. Especially for the stencil technique we are about to do, it is needed that the paper is very dry. This watercolor paper absorbs a lot of ink. If you look closely at my drying process, you can clearly see the difference where it is still wet and where it is dry. To be absolutely sure if the paper is completely dry, there is a way to test that. When you sprinkle some embossing powder over it, you can see by the spots where embossing powder sticks to it, where it is still wet. With a brush preferably, but I now use my fingers, you can then wipe away the powder and still dry the paper. Actually, if there are only small spots or lines, they might be interesting to heat emboss as well. That would give a marble effect, just what you sometimes see with alcohol ink techniques. Now I can trace and cut out the balloon. Now it is still possible to choose whether I want dark color on the bottom or the top of the balloon. Also, it is nice that the blend is even everywhere. Blending can be tricky at times on a shape, and it is easier on a rectangular piece of paper. Having now the basis for the embossing technique, we can now go back to the glass mat. We will do an extended version of the dry embossing technique with the text stencils. At first we need Versamark or other embossing ink. Versamark comes in a large pad, but also in a small one. My big ink pad is old and dirty, but yours should look more like this one, clean. Both work perfect, by the way. I re-inked my old one and is as good as new. It still works just fine. I will show you can use the bigger or smaller one for this technique. Before adding embossing powder, I recommend you always make the paper anti-static using talcum powder or an anti-static pouch. Recently I have this one, the anti-static pouch by Ranger. A compact bag that contains the powder, and when you swipe it over the paper, a tiny bit of it comes out and spreads on the paper. The excess on it I knock off. For this technique it is important you do it very well, so you have a perfect coverage for the embossing powder. Now the embossing machine comes in, and you need to make a sandwich for embossing with a rubber mat. It is the same as in the first video with the text stencils. You should watch that one after you finish this one if you haven't yet. For my machine I use a B-plate, on top of that the rubber mat, and on that the paper. Now the stencils come in. We will ink up the stencils. Actually, we're going to use them as a stamp. There are two ways to ink them up with Versamark ink. You can lay it on top of the ink pad and press it with your finger. Your finger will get inky though. That is no problem as long as you don't touch the paper. Ink it up very well and reposition the stencil multiple times so you are sure there is lots of ink everywhere. The other way to ink it up is to turn it over and lay it on your work area. It is still sticky from last time I used it. There is glue spray on the back. The glue spray won't have any negative effect on this technique. Actually, I think it works even better with spray on the back. You can ink it up by tipping the ink pad on top of the back on the stencil. Both ways are good. Just do what you prefer. Carefully pick up the stencil and try not to touch the inky side. Hold it at the edges. Put them in the right place immediately. Don't start sliding them around anymore, because once it's on the paper, it has already put ink on the paper, and then the result will not come out perfectly crisp. Now it is positioned correctly, I add 2 paper shims on top. That's for 2 reasons. Number 1, it gives a deeper impression on the embossing, and number 2, it keeps your embossing plates clean. And again, do not slide. The top B plate goes on top and you can roll it through the die cut machine. With the glue spray on the back, I had no problems running my sandwich through back and forth. I'm happy I used the paper shim. There was still a wet part. The stencil is now pressed into the paper. It made an embossing, which you can see on the back as well. Now you want to remove these stencils without touching them. Bend the paper and be very careful. Try not to slide or make unnecessary fingerprints. You now see that the embossing ink is on the paper. I take Seedless Preserves embossing glaze, which is actually a transparent colored embossing powder, and I apply it to the paper. This color fits very nice to the inked background. I add the powder twice and shift the paper in different directions to have a good coverage. Finally, I blow over the paper to blow away most unwanted grains. With a fine tool, I now scrape away the grains that don't want to be blown away. Make sure the heat tool is heated up very well. In my case, that is 30 seconds at least. Only then start melting the powder. Take care not to burn your fingers and don't heat too long on the same spot. Because the watercolor paper is thick and porous, there is enough room for the powder to sink in, and that will happen quickly. As you see, I do this technique again for the blue balloon. Probably this shifting was not a good idea, but is most probably easy solved since the stencil was a bit convex and did not have much contact with the paper. We will see. Apply lots of anti-static powder and ink up your stencils on the back of the text. You could do this technique with any stencil, by the way. I hope I am giving you some ideas. Again, this is such a beautiful background, and adding Princess Gold embossing powder will be a perfect match to this color palette. Silver would also work. You can see, because I did shuffle it a little bit, that some powder sticks in places where we don't want powder. I can wipe those off with a brush or a small sharp tool. Some patience is required though. This is such a fun technique to do, gives such nice shiny results too. And it is a very cool extension for using your stencils. Because these are positive stencils, they also add dimension to the print. It is so pretty. The red ink blended balloon I did in the same way, but while heat embossing I embossed too slow and melted the powder in part of the text. You can see this very well with the E and the T. This embossing is done with the Candied Apple Distress Glaze. I want a better coverage of the glaze, and so I take the risk of going over it again. I inked up the stencil again, place it on top of the already embossed text, run it through the embossing machine and apply a new layer of Distress Glaze. 2 letters are shifted a little bit. I think it's so minimal that it is not a big deal and you won't see it after all after it is heat embossed. We can now wipe off the excess anti-static powder with a microfiber cloth. By again using the embossing ink, you can also make a nice embossed border around the balloon. Dab the ink around the balloon and use the same embossing powder or embossing glaze as you used for the text. You see that I cannot reach the corners with that small ink pad. Versa Magic also has the Versa marker, which contains just the same product, but in a small marker shape. You can use that to color difficult areas, or also if you want to touch up areas on the text stencil that are skipped. Of course, I did the same with the purple and the blue balloon. For the balloons we need a matching color thread. The blue balloon can do with a white thread, but for the red and purple we can make our own matching thread. And for that we only need a white strand of yarn. 20 cm is long enough. The right color is in our reach. You just might not have any idea to grab for it. There's ink in our ink pads, isn't there? Just use that ink to give color to the yarn. I wipe over it and help it some more with my fingers to color that thread. I did not add any water. To color the thread for the red balloon, I used the same dark brown as I used on the darkest part of the balloon. That is ground espresso. It is easy to make. I have to wash my fingers though. Once the thread is dry, we can make a bow. To go with the purple balloon, I use the stamps from the Cats 1 collection. I stamped the meow just above the Let's Party. And I heat embossed that with clear embossing powder. The cute guinea pigs are still one of my favorite stamps that Carla Creaties designed. And since Let's Party can also go with the guinea pigs, I have to use one. I will use week to go with the stencil. And since I don't want to mask off the word squad, I will just cut it off really carefully to not cut a raised part. You might blame me for it, but I know I can put them together again easily when I need them stamped both together. I love that week. It is from the Guinea Pig 2 set. And of course I will also heat emboss this word. My thread is now dry and I can now use it to make a bow around the balloon. I made this card earlier. The thread I left loose and adhered only at the end with a small drop of glue. The lovely cat is from the Cats 1 stamp set from Craft Emotions. I colored this cat with Distress inks. I haven't filmed the coloring, but I already colored this cat with Derwent pencils, so maybe that is helpful for you. To have the cat sit nicely on the bottom of the card and not have its head sit in front of the party text, I cut off its bottom. For me it was better to give the cat a floor to sit on. Next to him I stamped a ball of yarn in the shaded lilac ink next to the thread. Now we continue with the 2 interactive cards, which are so much fun. To make the balloons a bit more sturdy, I traced the balloons on white cardstock paper. And I will need 2 balloons, so before cutting it I double the paper up and tape the 2 pieces together with regular tape. Now I can cut them both in one go. And this makes a nice sturdy backing for the balloons. For the base cards I use white Craft Emotions smooth cardstock. It is 250 grams. I cut it in length and folded it in half to make 2 top fold cards. I like the idea of being able to have the balloon rise on the card. And for that I came up with a simple system. A simple system that you can make yourself without having to buy expensive dies or make complicated drawings. The front of the base card I very lightly ink blend with the color tea dye. Not the whole front, only about 2/3 of it. Now we can use the balloon stencil on that to ink blend it. If all goes well, it will fall exactly under the large balloon stencil. The placing of the stencil will have to be placed on the correct spot. We don't want to have something peek from underneath. For the blending I will use the same colors as we used on the balloon. Those are candied apple and ground espresso distress oxide. To get a shading in the balloons I blend the top parts red and the bottom parts brown. Again I come back in with red to make a nice blend. Now this can dry. On the base card I will stamp and heat emboss this background stamp with paws, poops and bones from the Odie and Friends 6 stamp. And of course the anti-static powder is needed when adding embossing powder. Ink it up very well and press evenly everywhere. You can hardly see the stamped impression, but you can see it once you sprinkle the embossing powder over it. Next to it I stamp again to fill up the background. No worries that this does not cover the whole panel. The middle will be covered up with a balloon. Look what a beautiful shimmery background this is. It will match perfect with the blue balloon. For the blue card I stamped the cute dogs from the Odie and Friends 6 stamp set. To make the cute critter images I prefer to stamp with black Versamark ink on watercolor cardstock and heat emboss that with transparent embossing powder. The dog's noses are not stamped completely black. I correct that by coloring the noses black with a fine liner. And you see that the heat embossing will still work fine. The embossing will make it easier to color within the lines. The red card will have the cute guinea pig on it. How I color the dogs as well as the guinea pig you can see on my short videos and my reels on Instagram. For colors I used the Distress inks Ground Espresso, Black Soot, Candied Apple, Weathered Wood and Distress Oxide Tea Dye. Check them out and subscribe to my channels to support me and to be inspired. Let's assemble the card. Before adhering anything, I want to reveal a text underneath the balloon. I choose for this text. Do I hear the fridge? That is so funny. The sentiment must be stamped exactly under the balloon, so it is covered but low enough to be revealed when the balloon is pulled up. I heat emboss the text, but that is optional. I also add white highlights with a Staedtler white pen. Just a quick wipe on the outer sides of the balloons. I would like the guinea pig to hold the balloon in its mouth, so I make a small cut in its mouth so the thread will fit in between. Place the scissors just above the lower lip and cut below the dark line of the upper lip, not completely till the end. I want to have the guinea pig sit behind the balloon so the thread will be put in its mouth from the front to the back. When we pull the balloon, then the thread will rise with it. We can adjust the length later. What you need for the mechanism is very easy. You need 2 strips of paper. Here comes my leftover laminated folder in handy. I will link to an old video I made below in the descriptions if you are interested in making them yourself. The length of the strips are not important. You will need a longer and a short strip. The smallest strip you wrap around the long strip. Then you add glue on top and wrap it around again. You can cut the rest off. Now you have a band that can slide loosely over the other strip. On the long strip, I wrote the word pull on one side. You have to add glue to the band on the back side. I had already filmed it and messed it up the wrong way around, but this is how to do it right. Glue the band on the middle of the card, on the place where you want the balloon to go up and down. Next you glue a foam block and that pull strip. Stick it at the top of the strip. It could be a little higher than I did, but you don't want to have it peek out above the balloon. The balloon will be placed like this. And now we can see where to put the other foam block. That foam block is to prevent the balloon from being pulled up higher. So the strip should not come higher than this. And that is why we also stick a foam block here, so that this hits the band and the strip cannot be pulled out. So this is where the balloon will slide. Now I check if the foam block and the strip are fully covered by the balloon. And because I see it's not fully covered, I replace the foam block a bit higher. It is still sticky and I cut off a little bit from the long strip. I will do it again in a moment with the blue balloon in a slightly different way. Now we can remove the back of the foam blocks and adhere the balloon to these 2 foam blocks. Be sure that the top of the strip is in the right place and the balloon is positioned with the text horizontally. And now we can use the pull tab to lift the balloon. If you want, you can also do without the pull tab. You can also pull the balloon itself. It looks like you cannot see the text, but that is due to the shade. Now the guinea pig can be glued flat to the card so that the balloon can float in front of it. One of the threads can be cut short, and the other end of the thread can go into the mouth of the guinea pig we cut. Finally, we can glue the end of the thread to the card with a tiny dot of glue. And now the card is finished. 2 easy and fun techniques in one card. The 3 cute dogs I colored with the same inks as I used for the guinea pig. When I cut them, I intentionally keep a white border around them, but you can also cut them close to the inked outlines if you prefer. Only keep the white border at the bottom. This is kind of a ledge for the dogs. They are peeking over it. In a reel on Instagram and a short on YouTube, you can see how I colored these dogs. Once again I show you how to make the mechanism for the balloon. So I have a longer and wider strip and a small strip. You fold the small strip around the long strip and glue it around the long strip so it becomes a band. I have too much glue, so that will have to go. Now I can make the band by folding the strip. And you see, the band is loose and can still move freely around the strip. Now I can cut off the rest of the band. The dogs I will stick on the card with foam blocks. The dogs will be raised on the card, which means that the end of the balloon will go behind the dogs. Oh, smart! The middle head of the dog will have to do without a foam block, otherwise there's no space for the balloon to go behind it. From the dog's one stamp set, I now choose the text "Sniff sniff, is that cake?" You can find other cards I made with this stamp set on my other social media like Instagram, Facebook and Pinterest. And I also use these stamps in the other stencil videos on YouTube. Here is the strip with the band. Just add glue to the band and glue the band to the card, in the middle of the card. It does not specifically matter how high or how low you glue it down. The strip is still loose in the band. Optionally, you can write down the word pool on top of the pool tab. I took it out. That was easier for me for writing. Now we need to measure how long the pool strip may be. The balloon comes up to here, so we can cut it off here. I could also have made the strip a little narrower, then the end could have been a little longer and fall under the spout of the balloon. Now just glue a foam square at the bottom and at the top of that pool strip. And you can stick the balloon on top of these foam squares. Make sure the pool strip is parallel to the top of the card before you stick the balloon down. Because the dogs are dimensional as well, I first attach the top foam square to the balloon. Then I shift the balloon upwards and stick the bottom one as well. Now it can move behind the dog and rise up again. For this balloon I think a white thread is good enough. There are multiple ways to tie a bow. This is the way I used to do it. Pull on both ends to make the bow larger or smaller. The end I will cut off and tuck behind the dogs. I could have made a cut under that tiny dog's paw though, and tuck the thread in. Well, this is the final card with that amazing dry emboss technique with Versamark and the embossing powder and the fun and easy pull tab on the balloon. Product links and links to other videos can be found in the descriptions of the video. They help me to keep up making more free videos for you. You can also find my cards on Facebook, Pinterest or Instagram. Subscribing to my YouTube channel CisVolk and writing a comment below will help YouTube know that this video is worth watching and show it to others. So doing that is much appreciated. This is the 5th inspiration video I made. Here on screen you see some of them and also the shorts for coloring the dogs and guinea pig. Bye bye!